What inscription was placed over Jesus' head while he was on the cross? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Mark on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, turn to Mark chapter 15. We're going to be reading from verses 16 to 32. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Mark chapter 15, beginning at verse 16. Then the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they gathered together the whole garrison. And they clothed him with purple, and they twisted a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Then they struck him on the head with a reed and spat on him, and bowing the knee, they worshipped him. And when they had mocked him, they took the purple off him, put his own clothes on him, and led him out to crucify him. Then they compelled a certain man, Simon a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus, as he was coming out of the country and passing by, to bear his cross. And they brought him to the place Golgotha, which is translated place of a skull. Then they gave him wine mingled with myrrh to drink, but he did not take it. And when they crucified him, they divided his garments, casting lots for them to determine what every man should take. Now it was the third hour, and they crucified him. And the inscription of his accusation was written above, "The King of the Jews." With him they also crucified two robbers, one on his right and the other on his left. So scripture was fulfilled, which says, "And he was numbered with the transgressors." And those who passed by blasphemed him, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha! You who destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." Likewise the chief priests also, mocking among themselves with the scribes, said, "He saved others, himself he cannot save. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, descend now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Even those who were crucified with him reviled him. In our last episode, we had Jesus' trial before Pontius Pilate. Pilate, though finding Jesus innocent, still convicted Jesus and sentenced him to death by crucifixion because the crowd demanded it. He released Barabbas, a murderer, to them and handed over Jesus to the soldiers. The soldiers of Pilate then took Jesus into the Praetorium, which is the governor's palace or dwelling. Once inside the Praetorium, they gathered the whole garrison together, stripped Jesus of his clothes, and put a scarlet robe on him. Why did they do this? A scarlet robe would be the clothing of a king, so since Jesus was supposed to be the King of the Jews, he needed the proper clothing. A king also wouldn't be a king without a crown, so they found some shrubbery that contained thorns, twisted it into a wreath shape, and placed it on his head. These thorns would have no doubt cut Jesus' head when they placed it on him, thus injuring him further. Dressed to look like a king, the soldiers bowed the knee and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Of course, these soldiers were mocking Jesus here. A king wouldn't wear a crown of thorns. He would have a real crown. To go along with that, the robe that they gave Jesus, though it was kingly attire, it was likely well used, for why would they have given him a new robe? A king wouldn't be wearing used clothing, hand-me-downs. He would wear brand new clothing. The Roman soldiers, in mocking Jesus, didn't see Jesus as a king to rival Caesar. They saw him as a fraud, a pretender who was about to be put to death. To add to this humiliation, they spat upon him, and they took the reed and struck him on the head. This was humiliating, for Jesus deserved to be treated as a king. But Jesus suffered this humiliation, this grief, this agony, so that we could have the forgiveness of sins. After putting his clothes back on him, the soldiers took Jesus away to be crucified. Part of the crucifixion process is that the person who was being crucified would have to carry their own cross to the place of crucifixion. Contrary to what we see in the movies, Jesus would have only carried the cross beam, for the vertical beam would have been placed in the ground at the place of crucifixion. But by that time, Jesus was called on to carry the crossbeam. He had been beaten by the Jews, beaten by the Romans, and so his body had suffered considerable damage. Add to the fact that he had been up all night and likely for a period of over 24 hours by this point, and he was extremely tired. So along the way, they found a man, Simon of Cyrene, and compelled him to bear the cross. Simon was the father of Alexander and Rufus, a fact that Matthew leaves out. These two men, though we can't identify them for sure, must have been people that those in the first century could identify, or else they wouldn't have been mentioned. The place of crucifixion was called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. When they got there, they gave Jesus wine mingled with myrrh as a numbing agent, but Jesus didn't take it, for he was not going to dull any of the pain that he would have to suffer. The time of day when the crucifixion began was the 3rd hour, or 9 in the morning, a detail Matthew leaves out. The Bible simply states then that they crucified him. Movies depicting the crucifixion made abundantly clear the horrific nature of crucifixion. The Bible spares us those details, for they are not necessary to describe. While he was being crucified, they cast lots for his clothing. Above Jesus' head was an inscription written, "The King of the Jews." This would not only identify who Jesus was, but it also stated as to why he was being crucified, so that others would know. Two robbers were also crucified with Jesus, fulfilling yet another prophecy found in Isaiah 53, verse 12, which was that the Messiah would be numbered with the transgressors. Jesus didn't deserve to die. These other 2 men did. Those who passed by blasphemed and mocked Jesus, saying that you who destroy the temple in 3 days and build it again, save yourself. If you be the Son of God, come down from the cross, and they would believe him. Now, if Jesus had come down from the cross, I doubt the scribes would have believed him then, for Jesus had performed many undeniable miracles up to that point, yet they didn't believe. Could Jesus have come down from the cross? Yes, he had that power. However, if he had done so, we could not be saved, for he had to die to pay the price for sin so that we could have the remission of sins. The thieves who were crucified with Jesus mocked him too. It was certainly the saddest of scenes to behold. With that, our time is up today, the Lord willing. We hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Mark chapter 15, verses 33 to 41, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.